So we just do an introduction then and we'll go off or whatever. Is that going on this camera? Welcome back to Everything from Nothing, Ireland's most, what would you say we are? Most live podcast. Yeah. So welcome back to Everything from Nothing, Ireland's most live podcast.
Are you excited?
I just got
alive.
I just got distracted by Owen. Owen was using his
coming from an undertaker.
That's it. Live from the funeral home.
Everything's alive.
It is.
nice change
Are
of
you
pace
excited?
for you.
Is everybody excited to be here?
to be alive.
Yeah. So we're joined by Jim Ryan, who's so you're the your pub, I suppose. Is your pub is your home. The Jim of the Mills is what it's famously known as. Are you Jim of the Mills?
I am sure now, yeah.
Yeah.
I inherited the title, kind of, you know.
So wait, when the pub, like, so yeah, it's Jim of the Mills is a famous pub, and I suppose just give a bit of background around Jim of the Mills. It goes every Thursday night, obviously pre the virus or that, like, so.
Yeah.
Who was the first Jim?
First Jim was my great grandfather.
Was it?
Yeah, he lived up the fields, and they had built a mill there.
Okay.
And they worked the mill. The family worked the mill down on the river.
Lovely.
And then the road was upgraded in 1829. Anglesey.
Wow.
The Anglesey New Line it was called.
Okay.
Lord Anglesey.
Oh, I've seen that on the maps. I was wondering what the hell that means. Yeah.
Yes. He was supposed to, the story, whether it was true or not, was that he was down with a party in Kilcommon.
Yeah.
And he kind of got lost in the fog, a shooting crowd.
Okay.
Friends of his, you know, big shots.
Yeah.
And that the parish priest gave them refuge when they got lost in the fog. So he asked him, was there any favour he could do in return? So they said they'd like a new road.
Yeah.
To either Tipperary town, Nena, or Thurles. And the one to Thurles, well, most of them are called the New Lines, actually. They're all over the country.
Yeah.
The new line, new road is all it meant. A good thoroughfare into a town from the country area. So the house then, after that, they added on a little bit, which became a pub and a shop.
Oh, wow.
So that was the story of that. And my great-grandfather then was Jim. And because it was a mill, he was called Jim of the Mill.
Okay.
They were Ryan Anthony's.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what, he was Anthony as well, like?
Yeah, he was a Ryan Anthony.
Yeah.
But just that branch then when he came down to live there.
Yeah.
So that name stuck then. And my uncle then, my grandfather then moved down to Thurles out here, Siskin.
Yeah.
And he married in there. And then my uncle, who never married, moved back up there as a child. And he was called Jim of the Mill then as well.
Oh, wow.
Because of the fact that it was a mill.
That's mad. That's really cool.
So because your name was Jim, you had to get that mill.
Yeah,
There's a long line of you. Yeah.
It couldn't be passed on to anyone else.
Yeah.
Who, it's mad though. Like I find that that was such a cool thing. Like people, I don't know, like it's a really like a lot of second names. You know, come from, you know, the jobs people did. And so I know that's not your second name, but like as in there's a lot of like titles and stuff like that. Whether it was like people's second names, like the second name Black, like coming from blacksmith. And there's loads of examples.
Me.
I know.
I'm Wood.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
what's-
from Woodcutter.
Oh no way!
Yeah.
Oh, that's mad.
Well, I know his friend in Limerick is an undertaker, you know, and he said they call him Jerry the Box.
No way.
That sounds really Godfather, like really gangster.
Yeah, Jerry the Box. It's really like Italian.
Godfather
name.
movie.
What?
Annette.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, it's mad. I think it's mad the way people don't still do that. I kind of like it. I suppose like just the trades aren't as like there's so many people doing different trades. I don't know. I suppose I don't know. You wouldn't really call it like Patrick the software developer. It doesn't really have a ring
the
to it.
YouTube influencer.
No, it doesn't have a ring to it
Same.
like Jim of the Mill does or anything like that.
Saddlers all over. Saddlers.
Yeah,
You know, Saddler
Yeah.
was the man that made the tackling for the horses.
Yeah.
Oh no way.
You know.
Yeah.
And that's that's like their second Saddlers.
Well,
or-
you know those Ryan Mart. Often it was the predominant name in the family.
Ah, okay.
You know, Anthony was our name because all the eldest sons were Anthony. That became the main. So they were all called generally after the father's father.
Okay.
The first son.
Yeah.
And the second son would be called after the mother's father. So the line of names came down years ago, not like today now. They don't bother with those names.
Yeah, it's mad.
And were you happy to accept that title, Jim?
Yeah, I was sure. I kind of I didn't mind it at all. Ryan, here in town we were known as just Anthony's.
Yeah.
And one time my grandfather was in town, you know. He was Anthony Ryan Anthony. but he was never called only Anthony. So some fella in town met him one time and he says to him, what is it at all? He says, Anthony. What kind of a name is it at all? Well, says he, I'm Anthony anyway, you like it. Anthony Ryan Anthony.
That's really cool.
That's cool. And you played for the Sarsfields, didn't you?
Oh, I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I played for a good few years.
Wow.
But you still play a bit of hurling? You go puck the ball or anything?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Pucking with the lads above in the back haggers there.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. And you're also a farmer as well. You were just saying, like, after this, you're going home to give the cows the fodder.
Yeah. With the sucklers now, they're not as... You wouldn't be as busy as if you were milking cows.
Okay,
I used to milk when I lived out in Siskin. My brother John is, he's out there now. But, we used to milk cows there always. Farming was different long ago. You milked a few cows maybe. Most farmers had about 10 cows and they chilled a bit. Chilled a bit with the horses at home, a pair of horses. And all our neighbours were the same, It was mixed farming.
Yeah.
Because you milked a few cows and you brought on a few cattle and brought them to the fair here before the marts.
Yeah.
And then they sold the corn to O'Mara's, or that time O'Mara's had a corn store. They'd buy the corn. And then the beet. Beet was a great crop.
The sugar beet stuff.
Sugar beet,
The factory with it.
It was a great crop.
That's when the sugar factory and stuff was going, or even before that?
No, they didn't grow the beet until the sugar factory about 1932.
Oh, right.
And,
okay.
That was a great crop.
Okay.
And it benefited everyone.
The campaign to
the
money.
campaign was, and it was, there was about 700 people working in the campaigns.
Okay.
What are the campaigns?
Yeah.
When it's the period of time where you're bringing in the sugar beet, isn't it?
Yeah. You'd pull the beet. Most people pulled it by hand that time.
Yeah.
They'd only have a few acres,
Yeah.
Where the bigger farmers might go into 4 or 5 acres, but there was no mechanization.
Why was it called the campaigns though? Like pulling the...
Because the beet would start to be...
Whoa, Jesus.
The beet would start to be pulled around the end of September, early October, and it would go on until into January.
Okay.
Maybe 3.5 months sometimes. A long campaign. And the beet had to be processed 24 hours a day into sugar.
Yeah.
And the offshoot of it was pulp.
What was it, September to when?
In September, they'd start pulling it. It often ran into January.
Did it?
A long campaign.
Wow.
If the beet crop was good. Depending on the tonnage.
And like after that, the whole thing just kind of ground to a halt. Did it for a while or what? Store it and sell it like?
Oh yeah, they'd have all the sugar made.
Yeah.
Several of like syrup.
I remember the smell of it. Do you remember the smell of it?
I do. You'd come and waft it across the countryside.
The pulp can be used like they dry it out and feed horses and things like that with it, don't they?
They fed cattle with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they used to dry it out, and more of it they'd sell as wet pulp without drying it. So big lorry loads would come out and they'd throw it in the yard and feed it to cattle.
Wow.
How long ago was all of that? That all of that was going on?
That's only finished.
Was it or something?
88, I think. Was it?
I don't know. I remember going to school and we used to on BMXs. Everybody had a little BMX bike and you'd be grabbing onto the back of the truck to get you down to school and getting home. It was a real...
That's
fun.
Do you ever get on the trains that go through the bog? There's a train that carries the turf. I got on there was a couple about 2015 or something. Yeah, we used to get on, like, they're still going on or whatever, but like there'd be really long trains like full of different trailers of briquettes, like, and we'd just be we were young as well, just having a drink or something, and then we'd just hop on the back of it and we'd go the whole way through the bog, like, and it was such a like liberating feeling. It's like the closest thing you'd imagine to like train hopping in America or something.
We had it in Mississippi. We used to have it. I was in Starkville, Mississippi for a year, and we used to have the train going at 2 miles an hour through the town, but it'd be going on for an hour. Like,
wow.
So long. Yeah. You can just hop up on it kind of and go down to Greenwood and then hop up and come back.
That's mad.
Fantastic. Where was it?
Starkville, Mississippi.
Oh my God.
Have you ever gone abroad anywhere?
There are a few places.
Yeah.
We went out with the Sarsfields after winning the county final. We went out to America in 1975.
Oh wow.
Oh, which part of America?
Yeah, we raised money below, and
Which place were you in America?
we were in New York.
Oh wow.
Nice.
Yeah, and then a couple of times later on, then we went to Salt Lake City.
Oh, okay.
Paddy
Yeah.
Carley was involved. Father Paddy over on the Avenue.
We know
Yeah.
Paddy, yeah.
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 And Paddy used to invite. They twinned with Turles.
Yeah, that's mad.
Salt Lake, and
Yeah.
Paddy used to invite a group of musicians out. So
Yeah.
I went out about 3 times, and other groups from around the county. He always kept it to Tipperary.
Did Paddy play hurling, did he? Was it?
Oh,
No.
Paddy was a great,
Yeah, her dad said that.
Yeah.
He was a good hurler.
terrific, a great soccer player,
Yeah. Was he? Yeah.
great golfer, everything. You know.
I remember his dad, Luke Carley,
Yeah, he worked with G.
Yeah, he did,
finishing up.
He was a lovely man, yeah.
Yeah, he came down as a coach builder originally.
He was with Burks, was he, or something, making coaches, yeah.
Brook Street,
exactly, yeah.
Do you know what the process is with, like, because we for the parade, like, you had a story in the parade, sound for doing that as well, for entering in your part. But yeah, we also had like a part of the Salt Lake City that we've uploaded onto the YouTube now. So like, yeah, because we were doing research, like, and it's mad that Salt Lake City is twinned with Thurles in the area or whatever. So like, do you know what the process is? Like, how, I've always wondered, how did they decide, like, how do you twin cities or areas?
It's all the Mormons in Thurles.
All the Mormons, yeah.
Yeah,
Salt Lake City, Mormon. Is it?
I think so, yeah.
It was due to Paddy Carley.
Okay,
that was the Thurles connection.
So did he, like, so it was on his end that he decided, figured out how to twin it, was it?
They used to send priests, you see, down through the ages to Salt Lake. It's mostly 90% Mormons.
Oh, wow.
And they being the minority, it's supposed to be near a pub there, but we could get our hands on plenty of drink nonetheless.
At your contact.
There was about 3 pubs there.
Yeah.
And the gas part of it was that even though they abhorred seemingly the culture of, they were taking on the takeaway pubs, like, you know. They were still knocking a good kick at the tax.
Okay, right.
You know, for themselves.
Yeah. That's mad.
Okay, so yeah.
That's funny. Did
There's not loads of Mormons in Thurles then. I got that wrong.
In Thurles?
Yeah,
no,
sorry.
not in
I thought it was
Thurles.
the commonality with the proportion of Mormons.
There probably could be somewhere. It's a hidden Mormon society in Thurles.
I think they had a connection here with on account of Paddy, and Father Simple was also there, son of the famous Tom Simple. And there was a priest from Upper Church there, Wickstead. Father Wickstead. And always a connection with the Archdiocese here, you know, of Cashel and Emly.
Okay, right.
That was the connection. And then, of course, Paddy was well known around the town, and the council contacted him and they made arrangements.
Yeah. And Jim, you have is it 5 daughters you have?
Yeah, 5 daughters.
We've had 2 out of 5 of them on the podcast so far, and I think like all of them have so much to talk to. I think eventually you'll have all of them on because you are just a really talented family. Is it just something in your genes? Like, how did every one of you are musicians and it's mental, like also naturally talented?
They're used to talking anyway. I tell you, with all the people coming into the pub over the years, you know, and they're listening to that, and they heard all the singing, and they often went to sleep overhead, listening to people singing beneath them in the kitchen. You know, and there was every age group, of course.
That's so mad.
You know, older people coming from everywhere, singing songs every week. So them from all over the place.
Yeah, so just kind of they just kind of picked it up themselves.
They did.
That's so mad. That's really cool.
And like now, before COVID and everything, the pub was only opening once a week on a Thursday night.
That's all.
Yeah. How long had it only been opening, like the one night? Like, what was the transition to that?
Well, you see, the pub was when my Uncle Jim kind of got an accident and it closed down in around 1967 or 68, I can't remember. So I didn't reopen it, and I never thought it would be opened. You know, I was living outside here, outside the town here, and so we reopened it because they were threatening these dormant licenses that weren't being. Sure, you had one too.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, Billy used to open kind of once a year or something.
Yeah,
just for
you were supposed to trade, but if you sold a bottle of stout and got paid for it,
that was it.
That's
you
mad.
could say you were trading. So long as you were paying renewing it every year in court, you know.
Yeah.
So I reopened it in. They sent out a letter saying they were objecting to these pubs that were dormant.
Yeah.
So I went up and cleaned it up a bit, and a few friends of mine gave me a hand, and we started it off again.
Lovely.
And when was that?
About 1981 or 1982, I think.
Okay.
So I just used to go up and down then with a few crates on the boot of the car. That was enough. You didn't need a lot of drink. A few lads come in above in the night and just kept it going. And eventually I went to a Thursday night because various reasons.
So would you?
Do you enjoy it?
And I loved it,
Loved
it, yeah.
What were the main reasons for Thursday night? Like, it was a...
Well, it kind of... I suppose one time the girls were visiting me a lot the weekends.
Oh,
Because it'd
okay.
be a bit after hours, you know, in a country place.
Yeah.
Even though I hadn't the big crowds that time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought Thursday night might keep away from the weekend. But then Thursday night became better than the Friday or the Saturday. I used to open Friday and Saturday night. Many of the night I'd only have 4 or 5. A lot of my friends from Thurles used to come out in carloads, you know.
That's really cool.
Lots of people.
Yeah, Caught said a story on the podcast about this one time. It sounds like there's a few times with mad stories, like of a bus, a whole bus of people not making it back or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It sounded like there's some wild times, like where people.
God.
It sounded like you were very accommodating to those like left behind, like.
Oh, yeah, I remember the bus came from Brew one night. It was their last night in Brew. The last show of the year. But we knew we'd be safe that night from the guards because the festival was on in Thurles. And they'd be all tied up. So they stayed the whole night till about 9 in the morning.
No,
and they put on the whole show.
Lovely.
That's mad.
The whole,
wow.
And it's just mad as well, like, because people like who are watching this who don't like. Cause I've been out there once, like, and it's like it is your home as well. Like, it's you know, it's not like it's like a pub, but it's also your home. So it's like it is mad that like there was a whole bus of them out there. Like, it's so bizarre.
What I love is when people are singing a song and there could be a big mixture of people singing together.
Yeah.
There's lovely sound. Even old people and everyone, they're all singing the one song. But
that's right.
But you can tell they've been singing it for years because it's so perfect. Like,
it's
good.
It's well practiced.
It is, yeah.
What do you think the secret is, Jim? Like to get in that kind of level of hospitality and sort of relaxation that people seem to get from the pub?
They do, they do get that level. I remember a girl saying to me one night, she was an American girl, she sat on the window all night near the stairs.
Lovely.
And going home, she said to me, I've never felt as relaxed in my life, she said.
Wow.
I've enjoyed this night so much. She didn't sing now.
Yeah.
She just sat back and seemed to take the whole lot in. And she couldn't get over the mixture of young and old.
Yeah, because that's a real, trick that doesn't happen very often. Yeah. Now, is there something that you kind of consciously did, or was it just worked out?
Kind of evolved, and the fact that there were people with families coming and children and older people listening to them, and there was great attention given to every singer, no matter what sort of level of ability they had.
It didn't matter,
It didn't matter if they were a good or a bad singer, and the same with the musicians.
That would be my kind of place.
Yeah, we had some lovely, great musicians, and we'd have some just ordinary, like to join in the session.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter, they were all accommodated, and
that's so cool.
Like, that's a part of it.
I know. I remember I was out there for only once, like, and it was you have like that. I don't know, it's annual, but like you have like it was an outdoor event anyway. There was like duck races and stuff like that going on, and I'd obviously heard like loads. Everyone kind of knows about Jim at the Mills or whatever, and like my friends would go out there and stuff, but I never did until then. And I remember like just kind of walking around, and it was like, and then someone's like, you go in for a pint or something like that, and then they started walking in. I was like, wait, you're walking into their kitchen or whatever. And I was kind of like, I felt a bit, but then it was the first time. Normally, if that was anywhere else, I would have been more like, I don't know, would have over-taught it or something. But I could feel straight away that it was okay. And it was like, it was as if that sort of energy was embedded in it for a long time of like, the door was literally open. Like, and it was like, people were just walking in and out. And it just, because it still felt like you're home. But it also felt like the most welcoming place I've ever experienced. Like, it was really cool.
Yeah, people seem to get that feeling from it.
Yeah.
And then the kitchen, we had the old open fire, you see.
Yeah,
it's never changed. That's the same for 180 years now,
And that would be really characteristic, like even pubs in England and stuff like that. Like, the best pubs always had the big open fire in the winter and people sitting around it.
That's right,
Has there ever been a night where it got too wild, where you're like, oh, Jesus?
Oh, I did, so many above.
How did you manage that?
Oh, sure, barely managed it. Kind of a few hours, you'd always meet a few lads that you mightn't be kind of doing things out of the way.
Yeah.
Do you ever get the old hurley out on them, Jim? Do you have to raise the hurley to them?
The fist. Fist a few times, but you can't do that now.
You're not allowed.
You could be in trouble.
Before
you could use the fist on people when you got mad.
That's funny.
It never changes to the better, does it?
That's
and
funny.
is it one of the oldest pubs in Ireland?
Oh, I'd say, it's fairly old. It's gone back into the early 1800s.
It's mad.
So
when did the mill stop turning?
The mill stopped around the 1890s. There were no men there to kind of... My grandfather was gone down to Siskin. He had a brother who lived there and he died. So there were only women. Women mostly ran the place.
Is the workings of it still there?
No, the only part of it is there is the sluice.
Okay.
Which is filled in.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think all those things kind of...
Yeah, I know.
They meant nothing much to people at the time.
Yeah.
It could be resurrected
It could
again.
be if you wanted it.
Yeah.
But it's probably more authentic the way it is, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
What's your opinion on like having a pub out in the countryside? Like, because obviously you had to deal with that. You've seen like the time where there was no laws written around, like, you know, even drink driving. Like, I mean, there was obviously something around it, but as in, you know, like, did you find it hard, like, when, you know, being out in the country, when it sort of became very strict to, like, you know, even someone over one drink or something couldn't be caught driving? What's your experience in that whole thing?
Oh, it had a very great effect on some people who lived alone.
Okay.
I had loads of people who used to come, bring their car, maybe drink 5 or 6 pints.
Yeah.
I never remember any of them having an accident. They were living in the country, and they would go home slowly, and they wouldn't be drunk after 5 or 6 pints.
Yeah, yeah.
They'd be nicely merry, but no way aggressive or anything like that.
And you're saying they were like living alone, and
they were living alone. It was a great source of comfort.
Yeah,
yeah. Maybe sing a song or do. Many of them would do a recitation.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah. Lovely people coming in. Kind of, they disappeared one by one. So slowly the whole thing sunk into their minds that they couldn't go on the road for fear of being caught.
Yeah.
Many people now, none of them. I never remember one of them ever having an accident.
Yeah.
No. They wouldn't be mighty drunk, you know, as if they wouldn't be able to control. They were used to it.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think as well, it's a shame, like, because I don't think they're the people, like, drinking that reason that those laws started came behind is obviously you have your bi racers or that, like, people just who did start, like, you know, younger people who did start, like, doing up their cars and speeding around those type of roads, which is a shame, like, because those laws, like, yeah, like you said, like, have a massive, I didn't even think about, like, the level of how many people were probably alone, and that's their only source of, like, social connection.
Remember that ad years ago? It had a gear stick on it, drive at 5. Like, you could just have 5 pints and then drive. That was it was a kind of road safety ad. Yeah.
So what's the limit now? Like, I don't know.
Half a pint or something.
Jesus.
Back then they were kind of saying leave it at 5 or something, wasn't it? Or drive.
There was a famous man in Borrisoleigh one time, Paddy Delaney.
Okay.
Paddy was used to drinking and driving longer, you know.
Yeah.
And when they brought down the thing to about 8 pints, and it was discretionary that time for the guards, you know. Okay. So and it was roughly about 7 or 8 pints that time. Breathalyzer would catch you. So Paddy says one evening, he says, what he says? The man that can't drink, he says, after 10 pints shouldn't be driving at all.
That's very funny, one.
That's brilliant.
So, that's really good. There's a hint of truth in that as well,
isn't it?
Like what you're describing though with the pub, Jim, is like it's not even as though like the booze is the main bit. Like people like a drink, you know. But it's the fact, like you said, about the singing and the recitations and like that kind of social contact and that sort of creativity and stuff.
That was the main atmosphere about the pub. A lot of the people coming to me don't drink at all.
Yeah.
The mainstay of the singers and the musicians, they're non-drinkers. A bottle of water or a glass of water.
Yeah.
No interest in come down to enjoy the night, and they take great joy out of the night and go home enhanced.
And that was the old idea with the public house.
Yeah.
You know, that you come into somebody's house and everybody gets together and interacts and
That was the real meaning of a public house. It was for the public.
Yeah, exactly.
And I believe one time, you see, it was supposed to be like an inn, a rest house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people were entitled, if they never bought a drink, they were entitled to come in and sit down and rest.
Oh, that's really cool.
No.
Yeah.
When you say entitled, was that the sort of, like, you know, like Ireland, like I think you know a lot about this, the sort of the unwritten traditions of hospitality that sort of Ireland had, like.
Oh yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think that's why, like, it feels like that out in your place, because I don't know. I imagine it just feels like it's very like it has that proper raw, like true raw old Ireland feel to it of like that hospitality, because Ireland was like, you know, the land of a million welcome or 1,000 welcomes or a million.
It's gone up to a million later.
100,000 welcomes.
Yeah, 100,000 welcomes. Yeah. And so much as that has changed as well. I think there's a part of that I don't think you can actually ever lose that stuff, but I think it's something we have to become aware of to grab that back. I know, but people like yourselves, like, do remind us that still exists, like, and I don't know. Hopefully the country does get back to that. Have you any, like, is there any, like, traditions that you were passed on to, Irish traditions that are, like, really old Irish traditions that you still keep up to, like?
Yeah, but we grew up to that, you know.
Yeah.
Most people's doors were open to everyone long ago.
Yeah.
Even the towns, you know, people could run in and out and borrow an old bit of sugar or tea or whatever if they were stuck, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, you know, people kind of they needed each other.
Yeah.
And I suppose as people became more well off, even out the country years ago, people would say, we'll buy a tractor now. So they didn't need, often people would share horses. Long ago. They might have only one horse, they might have a big farm. So they'd share a horse with another farmer down the road to plough and till. Till the land, you know, when there was tillage going. And the necessity for that kind of declined. And people were saying, we'll be more independent now. And so the dependence on others went. And that probably kind of contributed to that. People stop and go to other people's houses. They need to look for something or alone as something.
Do you remember people doing that, like all working on a farm together?
God, yeah. They used to call it cordon.
Yeah.
Cordon farmers that would
What would you be doing, like saving hay and stuff like that?
Everyone's helps with the hay.
Yeah.
They might, all the neighbours mightn't be all that in with each other. They had their own, you know, there was rows too among families over our land and boundaries and water. That was commonplace, wells and all. But most people got on the finest. And you would have your neighbours that come in. I remember the Hades now next door. When they'd be finished working at Carrigan's, if they saw me father tramming the hay, they'd be all in over the ditch.
Lovely.
And in from the road, you know, and they'd work away there until nightfall. And people did it everywhere. It was commonplace.
Okay, all right.
Everyone helping over the road if they saw someone tramming a field of hay and the weather might be chancy. So they'd get up the hay. It was important to get the hay.
Wow.
How important those things were to people.
That's good, though, isn't it? Now they kind of like pretend they didn't see and keep going, wouldn't they?
That has come into the people,
That was brilliant.
I find that strange as well. Like I was in Portlaoise and I was walking up the road and a big stick fell off. Your man had like he's loading a load of broken up pallets on the back of his trailer. And wild, like I'd say, just throwing them on, like they were flying off the back. But one big piece of it fell off onto the road and like had nails or that in it or whatever. And it's a bit like it's a busy road for people to walk around, like there's a lot of people walking on the paths along that. So there was a load of people walking by it as it fell off, and I just thought it was mad. As in, it wasn't that like they consciously said I'm not going to pick that up, but they didn't even look, like they weren't even aware that sort of a disturbance had happened, if that makes sense. It was like they just kind of kept walking, and I was like, what the hell? So I obviously just moved it straight away, and I just left it side of the road, and I don't know, it just got me thinking a lot. I wasn't thinking like, oh Jesus, why like they should have picked that up, because I actually don't think they actually genuinely didn't notice or just meant nothing to them, because in their heads it's probably like a subconscious thing of like that didn't affect me, so they're just still going. Like I think that's so strange, because even when I was younger, we were living in Cabra in the estate. There was still very much a sense of it was okay to go and call into the neighbour, like in an estate in the town, in a council estate. It was still okay to call into the neighbour to ask for sugar if you didn't have any. It just felt like all that went so quick. Like I could nearly probably, you know, I'd say it felt like within a few years a lot of that had went so quickly. Like and
you were young, sure.
Yeah, I know.
That shouldn't have happened. Like, you know, it's something we're at a loss for.
Yeah,
you know, it is to be lamented.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, because, you know, a lot of Ireland is really kind of rural and sort of like by my standards of growing up kind of fairly remote, do you think that level of like community support and social contact like that prevented a lot of things that we see now, like mental health issues and sort of, I don't know, kind of like sort of, I don't want to say social degeneration, but like people sort of struggling to maintain themselves and their lives and stuff, like dependence on the state hasn't worked so well. But like dependence on neighbours and your community seemed to work really well for a lot of years.
Oh, I'd say it did, yeah. You know, people kind of looked out for each other.
Yeah.
And if they knew there was someone vulnerable, there were many families long ago, the brothers or sisters, one might only marry. I know loads of families, there was a couple of brothers and sisters, never left the home. They got on the finest, and if you went into those houses, there'd be a welcome there, and the friendship with the people kind of kept each other going.
Yeah.
I'd say sustained themselves. You know, there was a bit of sadness and depression too, but that wasn't too obvious, but they'd be boosted up by people coming in and out. Yeah. And people did look out for people. Yeah. They were aware of, particularly the women, they might see those things more than men. in other women, down the road, and they were, and I suppose religion was a very big thing. Going to the church, and for families long ago, the big thing now, the big change now is all the work that went Saturday night shining up the shoes for the children. So the mass was a big social occasion.
Yeah.
It was more a social occasion for many than a religious occasion.
I think so, yeah.
And they met after mass. And the men spoke outside the gates and the women got their messages for the week.
Yeah.
That was when the rural shops were going.
Yeah.
See, then the supermarkets came in and decimated the rural Ireland. People then wanted the excitement of coming into town when they got cars and things like that. And so the local shops died out.
It's so mad.
And the local shops, like, there was a shop at the mill now, and it was all down on the book.
Oh, yeah.
And they were everywhere, in the towns and everywhere. When we were out here now, we dealt in a place called Connie Carew's down there, where Super Value is now. And that's where we got our messages. And I could call in there going home from the creamery. I used to come to the creamery with a horse and car. And I used to call in there and get all the messages I wanted on the book.
So it was just the note was made of what was owed, and you just...
They used to call it on tick.
On tick, yeah. And it was...
That was it.
I have 2 books in the hallway, actually, from the shop in Westgate.
Yeah, she had a great shop too.
Yeah.
People still owe you money.
Yeah.
We have them in the hallway. We'll have a look now in a minute.
No,
Go find it.
there was a bit of money owed everywhere.
There was something I wanted to talk to you about, Jim. I'm glad you called in.
Well, we left Hugh Ryan's and we went up to Connie Carew.
Give him a doing.
Dumping the debts.
So your family had a great shop.
That's it, yeah.
And they're in the corner.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think as well, I think there's like, there are like what you're saying, like lots of, I think there's pros and cons. I think there's benefit in the change now, because like you were saying, it's just like, at the same time, it's like, what you were saying, like women were better at spotting that stuff. There was a lot of like negative sides, like there was still a lot of depression in about men and women that I think sort of came from a lot of men not being used to like their emotions, especially the sort of Irish, male or whatever. The Irish man was very not all as well. I think it came during like certain times. I don't think it was always like this in Ireland.
I don't think it was either.
No, definitely
sure. If you go back to, I was talking about this the other day. Talking about, you know the poem Court on Van Ihe?
I'm not sure. What do you
Brian,
know it now?
Brian Merriman's poem. That's a very long poem, about 60 pages. You should read it.
Oh, wow.
Recite it there.
60 pages. But Irish were full of debauchery, licentiousness.
I'd say it was great crack.
Mighty crack. As Charlie Hardy says,
we're trying to bring it back.
I wish I could have lived in. But so he depicts about, that poem is about, the fella is drunk, you see. He's going home and he falls asleep. And he's been tried then by in his dreams then, or his nightmare or whatever. He's been tried in a court by women. For his uselessness. So it is a marvellous poem. It's been translated from the Irish into the English by several great men like Frank O'Connor and all those.
Oh, wow.
Oh, they should bring that into being. I like that.
It's a marvellous poem.
That's really cool.
It only came in with when the church started to come into being in the 18... when the penal days were over and the church became powerful.
I think
Victorian
so
times,
Victorians, definitely.
It destroyed the Irish.
Definitely.
Took away their
Ireland,
their freedom.
Debauchery.
Irish people were like so wild and free, like, you'd have there'd be nothing said that, like, I don't know, that's like very Celtic, like sort of pagan sort of thing. It can be looked at it, but it's very just that Celtic wildness or whatever. Definitely sort of went over time through the church, and I think that like that's what resulted in so much sort of anger and depression in the Irish male, I think, because it's like repressed. You're repressing the wildness and the freedom that is in the Irish psyche, and
we were okay in the 1800s. It's kind of like after the famine, we started getting more religious. We only 40% mass going in 1880s, and then we kind of ramped up to the 1950s. We went full belt at it,
and it was poverty,
and the famine brought
poverty left an awful impact.
What happened to your man that was tried in his dream by the women? What was the outcome for him? He was tried.
A bad outcome.
A bad outcome.
The women said how beautiful they were with bottom and breast to claim attention, and the best concealed that I need not mention. And different poets kind of changed it, their translation, but all beautiful translation and all in rhyme. And from the Irish, original Irish.
Yeah, who wrote it again? Who?
Brian Merriman.
Okay. Wow. Where's he from?
Clareman. Okay. The Merriman School.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, he had connections with Kerry, I suppose, too, and that side. But there is a Merriman School there, I suppose, discontinued at the moment. But look up that poem now.
Yeah, I will.
What's the? I always get it wrong, but you know that it's a very like common one. The may the roads rise to meet you. Do you know that the 4 lines? It's
the wind be at your back and all that.
Yeah, and the rain fall gently on your fields, and I can't remember the 4. But basically, like the whole thing of that is like it just seems like it's a very nice thing to read or whatever. But I was reading a lot about like Celtic shamanism and stuff, and they talk about that of how aware the Irish. So people read that, and it's like a very lovely message or whatever for people. But the origins of that, like, and this is how like sort of like more like wild or connected the Irish were. Like, so like that actually came from like old Irish poets and shamans, and the whole thing is like talking about the 4 elements and stuff like it. So I don't know, I just when you're talking about the poetry and stuff, it just reminds me of there's a lot when people think of Irish poems and stuff like that, they don't look at it the way it was written originally, and it sort of just seems like nonsense. But when you really stop and like look at them and read them, you're kind of like, whoa, how they were ahead of their time. I think more aware of the way than people are now. I think people have lost that sense of awareness in Ireland compared to the way those men and women were, like, which is funny, like, because we think that we're becoming more advanced, but when they were running around the place naked around the fire, they were having, like, way better crack, like, you know.
Yeah.
And there was no harm, and everyone was fine, like.
And we're going to go back to that.
That's it. I'm sure as soon as lockdown is over, you know.
Yeah, sure, lockdown might have a positive effect. It might allow people to see things differently.
I think it will. I think it will. Yeah, there'll have the growing pains. I think there's a lot of good change to come for it, but there's good change happening in the world, but there's always growing pains with like birthing of a new thing, like. Yeah. Have you any? So you're known for your stories. Do you have any story you could tell?
Well, sure. I can tell you a few stories about. There was a man lived beside us, Jack Ryan the tailor. Yeah. Jack had loads of stories. Yeah. You know, he talked about little funny things, you know, and. Jack would be telling him in favour of himself, you know, kind of all this. He was a great man. He lived out there in Cormackstown. Where Matt Short lived. Oh, I know. As you turn in our Boreen, out for the heat there. Yeah. But he was telling a story one day. He was in Fire Street here. Okay. A young fella. He was born about 1894, Jack was, or 1892. And he was just there near your house. Yeah, yeah. And, you know, there'd be lads around the town long ago. Droots, they used to call him. Mad for drink.
Okay, right.
You know,
so that was a word for someone who was mad for drink.
Oh yeah, okay, a droot, like you'd have a drought.
Okay, yeah.
They used to call him a droot.
That's funny.
And that was the name. A lad might be standing at an old poor town lad, mad for drink, you know. Yeah. And near a penny. So didn't Jack see a coin on the ground? Right out. For instance, some fellow was after dropping a shilling or sixpence, and a pint that time was only a penny. Oh wow! Sixpence would buy you 6 pints, or a shilling would buy you 12 pints. Jesus! So because he saw Jack picking up, Jack was only a young fellow, about 10 or. So and your man shouts at him, "That's my coin! That's my coin!" He says. Is it? Says Jack, real cool, you know. Is it? Yeah, it is. He says, "That's mine. That's mine. That's mine. That's mine." Yeah. So it says Jack to him. Would you know it? He says. I would, says he. Yeah. And says Jack to him, was there a hole in it? There was. And says Jack, there's near a hole in this one.
That's very good.
So there was lots of great stories. Yeah. We had another man lived near us one time, the relation of Billy Whalen. He was a great, funny man. I suppose you shouldn't tell anyone's name, but there's no harm in it. But he was drawing the pension, you know. But he didn't want anyone to know he was drawing, and everyone knew he was drawing the pension. He was that age, but he was very secretive about it. Yeah. So he was below in the post office in Thurles anyway, and his neighbour, a young neighbour who knew he was drawing the pension, happened to be behind him. So he was there at the kiosk that time, a little window at the post office, and when he turned around, his neighbour says, "How are your bill?" he says. And of course, he didn't want anyone to, he thought in his own mind that no one knew he was drawing the pension. You know, he didn't want to admit he was 70, was the pension age that time.
Yeah.
So he turned back into your one inside the counter and he says to her, "Didn't I tell you," he says, "'twas stamps I wanted."
Did he keep the money though? Did he still keep the money?
Oh, of course he did. Just to cover himself up,
Yeah. But he ended up with half a dozen stamps as well.
Walk off in the hoof with the money. That's funny.
Look, there were loads of little stories, that people would tell. And they tell them over and over again. There was a story my Uncle Jim used to tell about a man over the avenue here long ago. One of them was in jail for stealing a cow.
Sticking away.
And the other fellow was in jail for stealing a watch.
Okay.
So the two of them were anywhere walking around one day below in the middle of the day in the jail. They'd be only in for maybe a week or a fortnight. Get that time. Sure, stealing a cow was probably a big crime enough.
Would it be worse than stealing the watch back then?
But anyway, out of nowhere, and one fella says to the other, he says, the fella that stole the cow, he says to the other fella, he says, "What time is it?" And your man thought he was having a go at him. and he thought for a minute, and he says, says he, "'Tis milking time."
That's very good. That's very quick.
You related to the lambs as well?
Yes, my grandfather built the house over here, the Park Avenue.
Yes, I was thinking that.
He was a drum band man, like your own people were the Rossmore or
Clannyharp.
Clannyharp, yeah.
Derry Moore, they were around there. But so that was your grandfather, wasn't it?
Yeah, my grandfather bought a field there, and there was a little house there, seemingly.
Yes.
In the late 1890s.
Wow.
And he built that. He was a builder by trade.
Yes. What was his name?
John Lamb.
John Lamb, yeah.
So he built a house over there.
He probably built a lot of the houses along here
he did,
as well.
yeah, he did. Built the houses along the avenue.
Yeah.
And so they had a hotel there, Lamb's Hotel.
I've seen pictures, it's lovely,
And so they used to keep people. And there's some great stories about that too.
Is there?
Oh, yeah. There was, in later on, the hotel, there used to be a lot of commercial travellers getting off the train. They had about 7 rooms to hire out, And so there used to be commercial travellers would come in, and some of them, that wouldn't time there'd be no money taken in the evening, for B&B, a bed and breakfast. Or some would only want to bed, but they'd be gone in the morning, some of them without paying.
Right.
So then my mother was, they went over to England to be educated, They had aunts, nuns. Wow. So 3 of them went over to a place called Burnham-on-Sea.
Oh, yeah.
In Somerset. And so my mother went over there at about 10, and then she came back when her father died. She was teaching for a while in France and Belgium. And so that was a French order, Lara Trait. The Lara Trait convent. She had 3 or 4 aunts, nuns there. And so I had a sister, 2 sisters of my mother's went over there as well to be educated, They were kind of shipped off there. They'd only come home once a year, imagine, in the summertime. And they would boat. She was often telling me about the Inish Fail. They used to go from Cork to Bristol or there around, But Mrs. Quinn was the name of the woman. Yeah. She'd be Billy Quinn. Do you know Johnny Quinn, the television man now?
Yeah.
He's great. I suppose his great-grandmother. Yes. Yeah. And she was a very funny woman, very wishy woman.
Yeah.
But she used to drink in the snug in Lambs. Yeah. Well, the women who'd go into the snug, they wouldn't be seen, They didn't want to be seen. And they'd be having a few mediums. Yeah. That was a kind of a measurement between a pint and a half glass.
All right.
It was a special kind of a glass, a bit bigger than a half pint, a medium they called it.
Okay.
And so she'd be in there, and they'd have an odd dodgy customer. So out of fun, my mother would go in when a fella would come in, and she'd ask Mrs. Quinn, "What do you think of your man?" So your man could be standing outside, and she'd just go slip into the snow because they had so many dodgy lads coming in. So anyway, this fella, one evening, she went in and she says, "Look out there, Mrs. Quinn. What do you?" She could see out, but they couldn't see in. through a slit in the glass and says, "What do you think of your man there?" She says, "Well," says Mrs. Quinn, "I'd say there's more in that fella's head than a comb would bring out."
That's right.
And another one was, another evening she went in again and she says, and my mother says, "He looks all right," says my mother, "you know, he looks respectable enough. He has a hat." So Mrs. Quinn says, "Well, you could find as big a devil under a hat as you would under a cap."
That's very good.
She sounds great.
I love that. That's very good.
This woman was behind her son Jack now.
Yeah.
Jack Quinn.
Yeah.
That had be Johnny's grandfather.
Yes.
Johnny the television man. Sure, they have a whole pile of family around the town everywhere. But Jack was pulled for the mother. That time, truancy was a big thing. The child could be taken off you. And put into an institution. Truancy, you know, not going to school.
Yeah.
And she was anyway on the steps of the court, and Larry John, we often heard tell of Larry John, the solicitor. Right, yeah. And he was there, and he knew Mrs. Quinn was a very wishy woman. So he says, Mrs. Quinn was coming on anyway to the steps outside the court, and he says to her out of phone, you know, "Here comes," she was known as Quinn. "Here comes Quinn with the old shawl." And Mrs. Quinn, as quick as lightning, says back to him, "As good a shawl as ever your mother wore, and a better woman under it." So she was smarter than any solicitor.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
Yeah.
That's right good.
She was famous, and my mother used to tell me she used to borrow, even when she was later life, when she had a bit of money, she wasn't poor. She used to borrow £50 from this other woman every week. But even when she didn't need it, she still kept on the custom of going out to the other woman.
Brilliant.
She might borrow it on a Wednesday and pay it back of a Friday.
Just for that.
And she kept it on even when she didn't need it, because
the crack.
it was just, it was a kind of a social thing. You know.
Wow.
There was another man up there in Bornave then one time. He used to be stealing a bit of coal off of the railway, you know. But the guards...
Like off the back of the train, sorry.
He'd just bring over now, and he to hide the coal in the backyard, he used to whitewash it. So the top of the coal was whitewashed. But anyway, the guards got to hear of it. The poor man was little or nothing, you know. It wasn't worthwhile, but was keeping the fire going for him. But God Almighty, they caught him anyway. Jack Raleigh was his name.
That's mad. Did they think the white coal was a bit suspicious?
How long did he get away with it for?
I'm sure he got fined, or maybe got, I don't know, he got away with it for a long time, but sure, it wasn't a hell of a lot.
No, you kind of...
You'd think you'd dismiss it.
You'd ignore it.
There was another man out in Killinen one time. He used to be taken, he had a big family, you know, and he was a poor man, but he was a very decent man. But he used to take a few spuds out of a pit. But this other fella that was working there at the farm spotted him. And of course there was a bit of old jealousy. And didn't he... The end of the pit, like, they'd have a pit of spuds, the farmer would have. Big long piece of spuds, be enough to do with it, feeding them to cows and pigs and everything that time, farmers. But anyway, didn't your man, in order to catch the poor old fella next door, didn't he stick matchsticks into the spuds?
Oh, Jesus.
So anyway, your man took the spuds from the end of the pit and the matchsticks in him, and reported it to the guards, and your man came out and caught the poor old man with his bucket of spuds with the matchsticks in him. That was the evidence.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, your man...
Jesus.
Your man was a man by the name of Paddy the Barrack. He's dead this 80 years. We heard this old story. And wasn't he telling the story to old Peary Maloney? How great a man he was, the way he caught the neighbour. And all your man says to him, Peary says to him, "'Twas a case of one rogue catching another."
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
One rogue. He thought he was a great fella, great detective.
Yeah.
And the poor man could have, it was no harm the few spuds he was taking.
It's different now. The guards now trying to catch people with trailers of drugs compared to, like, you know, a few spuds.
Oh,
it's mad, like, the difference. And it just...
Yeah, and not in much time.
Yeah.
Well. Like, it's a short amount of time.
It's mad. Hey, so what we're doing, our collective's called Crugg, and we... our symbol is the old Celtic spiral, and we want to make that the sort of symbol for change in Ireland. Right. Around a lot of, like, you know, expected change, like mental health, helping people with that stuff. But part of it as well is, like, the change is sort of change, but it's also, it's blending the new world with the old for Ireland. Do you think, I'm just asking you now because you have a very good experience and you still very much live with that very hospitable part of Ireland that I would love if we could help revitalise. Do you think there's hope for that sort of part of Ireland to really come back, and do you think it's still possible?
I do, of course. It's in the nature of the people. I mean, we're only the progeny of the people that went before us.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's there, you know, it is really only to be brought out.
Yeah.
You know,
so it's always there.
Yeah, it is there.
Yeah.
The goodness is in people.
Yeah.
The goodness and the badness is in people too.
Yeah.
You know, to a degree, as it always was.
Yeah.
But you'd hope that the goodness would predominate our mental state, and our jealousy and our things like those were an awful thing. And it was poverty long ago that caused people to be jealous of each other. And they'd hate to see another one improving. In a way, you know, there was those aspects to life too.
Yeah.
And I think it was all to do with poverty.
Yeah.
But of course you could regenerate that. I mean, there's the goodness, if you can bring out and get people if people are free from poverty, I think that's the biggest impediment to life.
Yeah.
Because that when people get that kind of jealousy in relation to poverty, like when you exist in poverty, everything's about survival.
It is.
You know, so when somebody else is doing better or somebody else is a potential threat or something like that, then you can see how those kind of negative emotions sort of creep in.
Of course, yeah.
You know? But I was sort of surprised when you were saying about, like, everyone kind of helping out in the fields and stuff like that if the weather was a bit dodgy, and that whole thing of, like, you don't have to necessarily like someone to go and help to do the right thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to love everyone
and
get
along
with
friends
everyone.
with them,
but, you know, you have to sort of recognise that you're all working for the same kind of bigger picture and you're all there to support each other in some way.
Yeah, like
it's
like
humanity.
But sure, that always came to the fore in funerals.
Yeah.
You know, people that might be out with each other over an old boundary. And as I said, there was a lot of trouble like that with water issues.
Rights away.
You know, rights away and all those things.
Yeah.
But when a funeral would come, then they'd be all in all. You know, and they'd meet in the pub and kind of
put their stuff aside for the
they would, even if it was only for the day.
Yeah.
Like the man that was dying the time, and he was out with the neighbours all the time, and they says, make it up, will you forgive him, and you'll make it up. So the son was there, and he says, yeah, it was a priest who was intervening. I will, Father, he says. But he says to the son, but you don't forgive him, he says. You know, that was the family they were out with.
Brilliant.
So to keep it on, whatever hurt it was. It went deep.
My granduncle said a good row, like, sometimes it's good to keep you alive.
Oh, yeah.
He was saying, like, I don't know, he was on about a friend of his, he said two farmers or whatever, they fell out and they were bitter with each other. He said, jeez, when they made it up, didn't they die within a week of each other? He said, you're better off keep the row going, you know.
Yeah, and the best of friends, up and down the road, the best of friends fell out after the Civil War.
Yeah.
One of them would be De Valera and the other was Michael Collins or whatever, the Free Staters.
Yeah.
And I mean, they'd be the best of friends, but if they met in a pub, they could have an awful row. Or there was a famous one above one time in the Mountain Inn in Upperchurch. Two men, great friends. Yeah. But one of them was, when they got a few drinks in, the politics came to the fore, and one of them was running down De Valera. And the other man says, if you say another word about De Valera, he says, you'll be pulling the butts in the morning. That was the butts of his teeth. Like, your man was wanting.
Jesus.
It was only, you know, he wouldn't have been able to defeat the other man, but, you know, the bitterness ran deep.
That's so mad.
Things like politics.
Yeah, I think since then it's sort of like that was like the sort of that sort of stayed in Ireland since that time of Michael Collins and stuff. Like, it was real. It's been still divided since. I think it still massively is. I think I think where even before then there wasn't like any Irish people weren't really angry at any government, but now then it was like it became divided. But now I think everyone started coming together and just be angry at, you know, everyone's just angry at the one government now, which is just like, you know, the enemy of an enemy is a friend, like sort of thing. But I think eventually it just has to get a stage. It's like we can't just keep like, you know, trying to find the best of the worst. Like I don't know, we just need like younger people to. I think that'll happen. Like like we just can't, like if it's the same. Eventually, like those politicians will pass on and stuff like that, and that part of Ireland inevitably will end. Like that stuff that still exists till then. But it does take like people my age and stuff like that being like, okay, it is actually. I don't think they're aware that they can actually go and do that. That they can run for. It's just not a thing they're thinking about because. It's not important to them because, you know, a lot of them live so much on the internet now and they're so much invested in other parts of the world. And I don't think, there's a lot of people my age don't see the sort of what they can do. And I think they will. I think it's starting to happen now. I think in the next time, even in the elections, you're going to even see a lot more younger people running or trying to run anyway.
I think it's good if young people get involved.
100%. It has to. It's the only way.
You have to get involved.
It's the only way.
And I think like politicians are just a reflection of us. So like whatever you say about the politicians, you can kind of say the same about us. Like
I agree.
They are to a great extent reflective,
aren't they?
Yeah. I agree.
And like people spend a lot of time kind of thinking about that and blaming politicians and stuff, but it is like that, a reflection. And it's kind of like when you do that, it's like, what are you doing for yourself and your own community? You know, it's easy to give out about this and that and the other, but it's like, well, are you actually doing anything to show that there's something different and to get on with the stuff and to build the stuff that you want to be that?
They should be out there exhorting people. You know, those things now that have happened in lockdowns, they've little gardens.
Yes, lovely.
You know, people can come together.
And
those initiatives would be most important.
They're so important, and you know they're the kind of things like you said about the pub, like people of all ages sort of getting together for some kind of common things, that's something that's going to benefit everybody.
Oh, sure, that's very important. A sense of community, kind of. Anything that you can do to enhance that.
That's true.
Will you be opening up again after all this?
I will, sure, whenever we get the chance.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
We'll be down there.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It'll be good. Should we finish up now? That was a good conversation. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks.
Sharing your stories.
What about a song before we go? No?
You have a song?
Yeah. What do you think?
I might sing a song, sure. I don't know what I'll sing.
From Clare direction, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
Clare direction.
Yeah, see, the whole Considine connection with the Clare. Well, that would tie the whole lot back to the start, wouldn't it?
'Twas in the county Kerry, a little way from Clare, where boys and girls are merry at patron race or fair. In a town they call Killarglen, a pretty place to view. But what makes it interesting is my Bridget Donoghue. Oh, Bridget Donoghue, I really do love you. Though I'm in America, to you I will be true. Then Bridget Donoghue, oh, this is what you'll do. You'll take the name of Patterson, and I'll take Donoghue. Her father is a farmer, a decent man is he, admired by all the people from Killarglen to Tralee. And Biddy on a Sunday, when going home from mass, the boys and girls would stand aside and watch to see her pass. Ah, Bridget Donoghue, I really do love you. Though I'm in America, to you I will be true. Then Bridget Donoghue, oh, this is what you'll do. You'll take the name of Patterson, and I'll take Donoghue. I sent her home a picture, I did upon me word. It wasn't a picture of myself, but a picture of a bird. It was the American eagle, and says I, Miss Donoghue, the old eagle's wings, they're big enough to shelter me and you. Oh, Bridget Donahue, I really do love you. Though I'm in America, to you I will be true. Then Bridget Donahue, oh, this is what you'll do. You'll take the name of Patterson, and I'll take Donahue.
That's really cool. That's so nice. Thanks a million for that. That was really
thank
cool.
you. When we do come to the pub, never let me sing.
We'll get you.
They're dreadful things.
We'll coax you into it.
Yeah.
That's a class.
That's
really
the
sad.
price of entry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sing a song.
I'll empty the place.
We
for
won't,
you, Jim. It'll be
we
dreadful.
won't shove you out if you're not able.
I'm not able.
Right, thanks a million for watching, everyone, and thanks, Jim, for coming on.
All right.
That's class.
Thanks.
Thanks, lads.
Jim.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, lads. All right.
Thanks for that, Jim.
Okay.